Welcome back to Spitball Cards. In today's episode, we're talking about more hobby drama and news. I guess when there's a baseball offseason, stuff just goes crazy, which is great. That gives something to talk about. But in this particular situation, we talked about last week the PSA purchasing BGS situation, how it might be a potential monopoly. Well, now we have a congressman, I believe from New York. His name is Patrick Ryan, ironically. That made me laugh at first because of the whole P. Ryan situation that we had a few weeks ago. But either way, he submitted something to the FTC to look into this and saying that Collectors Holding is building a monopoly. My first question is, how do you guys feel about this? And the second question is, do you think there's any way this will change anything at all? So what do you think, Ty?
Well, it opens the door. It's a thing. I don't think this particular situation is going to necessarily lead to much. I'd be pretty surprised if it does. But it's evidence that there's eyeballs now on this type of dynamic, on the hobby in a different kind of way. And I speculated that with all these larger investment funds like Secure and, Ken Golden's promising there are more coming, between that and the postal office, post office theft problems and scams happening left and right on live selling platforms and people getting conned out of things and shill bidding exposure and now consolidation of powers across these big companies in a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think all those things have the risk of coalescing together into government oversight and regulation. So I don't know that this particular thing will actually lead to much, but I do think it's one thing that could be like a domino in a series of things over the next few years that could lead to some real things. And then if we have a situation where Collectors or Fanatics IPOs, that's just going to be another thing that adds more, visibility into the hobby in general. So, and I actually thought it was like P. Ryan, like Patrick Ryan of the hobby when I saw the first thing. It wouldn't have surprised me if he was kind of he promised receipts and things when he was kind of, when all the shill bidding stuff went down and I got accused. He was saying, well, basically made it seem like he was going to take people down who he knew had shill bid. So then when I saw this, I just thought maybe this was the first step in a bunch of retribution tour or something. But apparently it's just a complete coincidence, which is pretty funny.
I agree. It made me laugh. Phil, what's your take on this whole situation?
Yeah, so I've done some research over the last week. Somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and suggested, hey, you guys should look into whether this constitutes an actual monopoly and whether anti-monopoly laws would come into play here. Clearly, there's been a grievance that's been filed, but whether anything comes from this is a different story. And a lot of people shout from the rooftop, too much market share, too much power. This is a monopoly. FTC is going to get involved and they're going to break this up. There's a few issues with that argument or those arguments. One is, according to some of my research, it's not really just about having a lot of market share. It's what you do with that and what sort of anti-competitive practices come as a result. So some examples of that are you using that to restrict competition or harm consumers? Coordinated price increases across PSA, SGC, and Beckett, intentionally degrading service at one brand, so one of the brands that they own, to push another, exclusive deals with marketplaces that block rival graders, refusing crossover services to disadvantaged competitors, sharing non-competitive data between brands. So a lot of this suggests that things would get much murkier if they did indeed get rid of Beckett and SGC right away as brands. But right now they're pretending that, listen, they've got their own staff. We're going to continue to operate them. They're going to operate as a distinct boutique. With SGC, they're clearly losing a lot of business, but they're giving the appearance that it's still its own thing, right? Another issue is that, so there's no public evidence right now, price fixing of exclusionary contracts. Most of the complaints have been around market dominance in the optics there. So the FTC is going to care more about, is there clear consumer harm? Is there clear exclusion of competitors? Is there clear abuse of power? It's not having the power, it's abusing it. And another thing that hurts the case here is, one, the hobby, still relatively small versus other industries. Two, this is not a utility. this is something that you can live without grading. It's optional. Also, if you want, you can use one of those smaller grading companies too. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. CGC or one of the smaller graders you could still use, or you could not use any of the grading companies. I think a counterpoint to that is to sell through some of these marketplaces, you need to have it graded through one of the top graders. Isn't that one of Golden's requirements? Right? Also, alt, market movers to an extent, card ladder. You're hurting the liquidity of the cards you own if you don't have it in one of those top grading companies slabs, because those sales won't get picked up. Certainly by alt, I don't even know if the SGC sales get picked up. I think it's just Beckett and PSA. That's the way it was for the first like 2 or 3 years of operation. And then with TIE, of course, you guys do pick up SGC, CGC. Alt isn't picking up raw, right? So one could argue that grading a card to sell it is a requirement in order to provide not just authenticity, but also to give it some liquidity to guarantee you within some sort of band what the card will sell for. So I would say right now it's not going to get broken up. And another thing I look to as well is like, what's the most powerful monopoly in the hobby? Is it really PSA and collectors, or is it Fanatics, right? Like which one, if you're going to argue that, okay, like say CGC and PSA, they start to really increase their prices from a grading standpoint. Like, is that, even if they were to increase tomorrow 30% across the board, all of their prices, and then SGC and Beckett were to do the same, is it still any less favorable for customers than the Fanatics exclusive license thing that we have for football, basketball, and baseball right now?
I'd argue that's a bigger monopoly. There's significantly less options. If you're a basketball collector, you have to buy Topps cards now moving forward, while currently you still can grade with CGC or just not grade and still enjoy the hobby. But like realistically, if you want to buy baseball or basketball or football, you have to go through Topps and Fanatics. And so that, I feel like that's more of a monopoly than anything else, especially if they somehow got, which they won't, but if they got hockey cards in general, it would be a true monopoly. But it feels like, didn't Panini try to like pull the monopoly lever and it did not work for them? I don't know how the monopoly lever is going to work at all for this whole collector situation. It seems very improbable to me.
I think there's a pretty strong analogy or comparison point between the manufacturers and the grading companies. If you look at, yes, you have other options. So you have PSA, and then you have every other company, whether it's SGC and BGS or CGC or some other company. But the bottom line is, if you want the top dollar value for your cards outside of BGS 10 and black labels, you want to go through PSA to maximize your ROI and your secondary market value. And so there's a similar comparison to me with Topps having all the licenses for the big three sports, but there are still other options, but they're unlicensed and they're lower cost and lower desirability. So there's almost like there is like a comparison point between the two. I think you're probably right, Scott. Between the two, I would say what Fanatics has done in terms of layering everything underneath Topps does feel more monopolistic than the PSA situation. But both of them certainly have that word, thrown in their direction, and have for a few years now, even before this Beckett announcement.
And then one thing we haven't talked about is the vertical integration that Collectors has with the vault services, the repack now that's owned by Collectors.
Yeah, that's true.
They've got their hands in the entire life cycle to an extent, and so does Fanatics. Based on my research, that again doesn't constitute anti-monopoly laws from coming into play. Again, it's about what's being used to harm consumers. Are consumers getting a fair shot versus the power, the business position, the success that the company's had in expanding?
My thought process is, Beckett was already so underutilized that I can't imagine it really. And this is what Jeff's argument was, right? And then Paul Lesko, he commented, this is on X and other places, but Jeff's like, it's not a monopoly because PSA already was grading this amount and they only added like 4% of the whole grading quantity for the month or whatever. And then Paul Lesko's like, yeah, well, and then he came in and kind of like disproved that. But I get where Jeff was trying to come from.
Wilson.
Jeff Wilson, not Jeff Slabin. Speaking of Jeff, what up, dude?
Howdy,
But
boys. Hey,
Jeff Wilson was making the argument it's not a monopoly because BGS market share was so small.
Yeah.
Do we think there's any validity there? I know we're going to open ourselves up to some disagreements in the comments if you agree with that statement at all. But like, I understand what he was trying to say.
Well, we talked about this on Cards on the Table last week on SCI, and what I brought up was that it's not just about percentages; it's about the number of viable alternatives and who shapes the incentives, which is, I think, from Phil's research, it sounds like does play a factor in whether or not the FTC would determine that something is a monopoly and then take some kind of action from there. But it is tricky because, strictly speaking, there are no shortage of grading companies out there, and so it's not illegal to be dominant. That's not illegal. Like, that's not what constitutes a monopoly. The FTC doesn't come in and look at a company that's singular and exist, and then say, like, you're not allowed to be the only ones offering this now that you have a dominant market share and you've crushed everybody. There's nothing they can do. They can't make consumers go do more grading with another company. And like, there is some truth to the fact that Beckett's GemRate numbers, their grading numbers were just falling and falling and falling and falling. So I think it's more about like where the hobby views the brands, the viable brands overall, those that have had more of a stable history than some of the new challengers, the new, up and comers maybe. And that's the big red flag, I think, for everybody. So, and there's a lot of passion around people who have been Beckett loyalists through and through, even maybe in recent months. So I don't know. Interesting.
Jeff, I know you missed our thoughts, so you probably don't know exactly how we feel, but how do you feel so far about the whole monopoly claim to the FTC?
Well, I could see both sides of it, but I mean, let's be honest, this particular FTC Justice Department administration, I don't think is going to do much except follow the money. And our collectors has the deepest pockets. I feel like they probably have the most influence on what happens. So I don't think anything's going to be done. Whether it should be done or not, I don't know. I don't think it is a monopoly, but I just wish there were better alternatives. Ty mentioned that there's a lot of alternatives for grading. I just wish there were more viable alternatives for sports cards. We talked a lot about CGC last week, and it was funny because in the comments, it was very divisive about how even talking about CGC as a potential alternative meant we're completely out of touch with things, while other people said CGC is a great option for sports cards. So we'll see. People talk with their wallets. People make moves based on what's best for them. And I think, like we talked about last week, people aren't going to submit anywhere else besides PSA for the foreseeable future. I know CGC has a grading special now. I don't know if you guys mentioned that, but now they're offering 10% off. So maybe they're trying to reclaim some of that market share that they feel like they lost. But I don't know. I don't think the government's going to step in and do anything. I don't think regulation's going to do it. I think collectors and investors are going to speak with their wallets, and that's means nothing's going to change.
Another way to look at it too is it's not like collectors owns the equipment and owns some sort of specific thing that you need to start your own grading company. You can easily start your own grading company however you want to. It's not like the situation where Fanatics owns a lot of the printing facilities and printers and there's limited capacity. It's a slightly different situation with grading. Like, if you look at Beckett, why did they fall? They fell because that was self-inflicted, right?
Yeah.
SGC didn't have the capital and they decided to sell out for whatever reason, right? Nobody has a gun to the AGS's. Rudy from Alpha Investments, a new grading company. There's one that just started probably 3 or 4 years ago in New Hampshire. I forget the name of it, but they're still popping up all over the place. They can be profitable and they can have their own little niche and, still do pretty well, have solid margins and charge less. And it's not like PSA is going to do stuff to like force them out or hurt their ability to again start operations.
Yeah, to that end, Phil, I think in our comments, there were hundreds of comments, and I think there were probably 15 to 20 different grading companies listed in there that people were suggesting we use as alternatives. So you're right, there's no shortage. The barriers of entry are very low for grading. It's not like Fanatics where they have licenses for all the leagues, where the barrier of entry for creating cards is so high. The barrier of entry for grading is low. Now, to get to the level that PSA is at, obviously the barrier is high because you need a lot of capital. But as Phil mentioned, the barriers for entry to get into grading is very small. So more grading companies will still pop up, and that'll be the argument against a monopoly.
I have to think too that what's going to happen with that PSA for one already has done their due diligence on like whether or not this was even a good idea or not. I mean, strict just whether or not this would get them flagged or lead to more pain points than what it's worth. They would have gone through all this legal, analysis of everything. And then on top of that, I don't think that like the FTC would come in and block this sale like right now or do something so that they have to like actually let go of Beckett again. And honestly, if that did happen after some period of transition and whatever else that might look like, it could actually spell certain doom for Beckett. Like it could just be like a really weird situation. So there may be, if anything, there may be some restrictions put on what collectors can do specifically with Beckett in terms of like pricing and offering and how they're allowed to flex them, as kind of similar to what they've done with SGC, winding them into a boutique company and taking some of their employee resources and facilities. So that may be on the table, who knows? But I have to imagine that Nat Turner got his legal team, ready internally and said like, let's do all of our due diligence before we actually make this public and make sure that we're going to be covered.
Yep. Yeah. And in the meantime, too, we'll benefit as collectors from them treading lightly because of the whole dynamic of they can't just push all of their customers to PSA. They can't directly do that based on my interpretation of this right now. And they also can't collapse Beckett and SGC and take all their graders and then kill off those two brands. I don't feel like they can do that right away. So for the time being, there might not even be too many noticeable changes with regards to how things were 2-3 weeks ago before the acquisition. So that'll be interesting to watch, to see like how close to the sun is Nat Turner gonna treat this with BGS Beckett.
Yeah, I just one other thought as I was listening to some of the other people on YouTube talk about this. They bought the Beckett price guide, correct? Also the Beckett price guide and the Beckett online. I guess they have an online marketplace, which I've only heard about because I know Rob from Burbank has a lot of cards in the on the Beckett marketplace. But I wonder if they bought the price guide just for information for the database that it has, or if they're going to try to use it in some way. I would think they would try to use the goodwill of the Beckett name rather than just sunsetting everything. So I wonder if there's going to be some way that they incorporate the Beckett name into collectors and instead of just throwing it away. So I'll be interested to see what happens. Like Phil said, I don't think anything's going to change very soon, but I would like to see them do something with Beckett rather than just sunsetting the whole thing. So we'll see.
I think all the reason to start a spitball and cards grading company. Which one of us do you trust the most to grade your cards? Let us know in the comments down below.
We'll get a sticker. We'll get a sticker and put it on it.
Okay, so the other news, what other news do we want to talk about? There's one other thing we wanted to discuss.
Wilt Chamberlain, PSA 9?
Yeah, so PSA, they reviewed one of their PSA 10s as Wilt Chamberlain rookie card, and they came to the conclusion that it actually wasn't a PSA 10, it was actually a PSA 9. So what they ended up doing, because of their money back guarantee, is they paid out the difference of what that would be for that PSA 10 to be a PSA 9, and the person gets to keep the card. So people are saying like, oh man, so they're not standing by their grade. Well, this is something that PSA has kind of always done. And that's what the point of their guarantee is. If they make a mistake on a grade, then they will pay out the difference of what that grade costs. So let's discuss one, like everybody's upset about PSA changing grades in general. Do we like their ability to do this, to retroactively demote a grade as long as it's fairly compensated? Or do we still not like it for all the obvious reasons? What do you think, Jeff? I can see you leaning in. You have thoughts.
Yeah, this and now correct me if I'm wrong, but this was presented by the owner of the card, right? The owner of the card thought it was overgraded. They thought it looked
The
more.
current owner was he? He wasn't the person who originally graded it, though, right?
I don't think so. I think because it was graded a long time ago when the
Yeah.
standard seemed more lax. But what a great idea for somebody to have. If they bought a card, if they buy a PSA 10 some time ago, especially when it was much cheaper, then they can get cash for the card, but also keep the card. So it's a great strategy. I wonder how much more often it's going to be used now, because there's a lot of overgraded early PSA cards. So even if it's a PSA 7 grade, a PSA 7 in the 90s, and under current conditions would probably grade a PSA 4 or something. If you don't want to sell the card, but you still want to get the current value of the card, you can present it to PSA. They'll pay you the difference, and you get to keep the card. So this is interesting to see how this is going to go.
As the owner of the card, especially if I recently bought it, I like that perk. But then when you're selling it, you can't get PSA 10 money, which you probably wouldn't anyways if it was like a clearly overgraded example. I would say, as a general customer of PSA, it's more evidence that they can't consistently grade in line with their standards. So it's just sort of another shot at them, like, you couldn't get it right. Too bad. And this was clearly blatant for them to tap that insurance policy and pay out all that money, and clearly make a public spectacle of it too, which is being seen positively and negatively, understandably, by the masses.
I mean, it's kind of them admitting in some ways that their older cards are overgraded, just in general, which is kind of a concern. That's why nobody wants the old slabs anymore. That's why nobody pays a premium for the old slabs anymore, because there's a concern around them, and there should be concern. Some people say, "Oh, they used to grade harder." Like, I've heard people say that for the old slabs. I can personally attest they do not grade harder back then. They grade harder now. So, I mean, they do have a lifetime payout amount. So you can't just keep doing this as a business. I think it's around $600,000, like $500,000 or somewhere around that mark. You will stop.
They pay more than that on this one, Scott?
They did. I think it must be like a one-time thing. But like, this guy can't keep buying overgraded 10.
I thought it was like a $250,000 cap lifetime.
I know. I don't know what
that's what their terms say, is that's the cap. But I listened to an interview between Neo and Mike Junkwags Hero, and both of them said they believe they would have paid out the full thing here. They're not, PSA is not beholden to their own terms. They can go outside of their terms. I imagine, like, if they hadn't paid him out the full difference, then there could have been like a lawsuit or something. You know, this guy
and it would have looked bad.
Yeah, they just don't want those optics. So this guy just sort of came in and said, like, yeah, it's time for me to cash in on this. You guys clearly screwed this up. And to me, it just begs the question, like, on a card of that profile, where you're literally talking about a card going from pop 3 to pop 4, from on the number of 10s in existence, and you have to know this is a high 6 to 7 figure card. If this gets a 10, like, what are they doing? And then it opens up people to the conversation about, oh, they just wanted to give it a 10 to get the upcharge, but now it's come full circle and like bit them in the butt. It's just I'd like to know. I would like to have a deeper understanding into the internal processes and procedures of, like, how does this happen? And if I'm asking PSA for something, that's what I want to understand. Like, what the heck? What is your process that a card of this profile, of this magnitude, apparently, according to what they've told us, makes it not, past at least 2 different graders, and then gets slabbed as a 10, and then comes back. You could look at the thing; it's off center. There's no way the card's a 10. And now it comes back full circle, and they're like, "Oh yeah, our bad. Here's $750K," to just like make you go away with your 9. Now it's just a weird, strange thing. I would like to hear Nat Turner speak to that, like, directly, and how that even happens, because I can't imagine they're happy about it. How could they be happy about it?
Ty, they talk a lot about how the standards haven't really changed, although they agree that the centering standards have slightly changed. But otherwise, they say the standards haven't changed, just how the graders interpret them have changed. So maybe since that was originally graded, their interpretation of what a 10 should be has changed. But my wonder is that all those cards that we hear PSA's gatekeeping gems on, like the Griffey Upper Deck and the Jeter, what is it, a Jeter SP?
Yeah.
The Ricky Henderson rookie. Yeah. Because there's a lot of those that are graded 10 that don't look as good as some that are graded 9. So if you own one of those, you could cash out massively. If you don't want to sell the card, you could cash it in, have it downgraded. You still get to keep the card. If you bought it a long time ago, I feel like that's the thing that's going to happen. Some of those low pop cards that are obviously overgraded, but they have huge value in 10. Somebody's going to approach PSA and be like, well, I'll just take the cash, right?
Yep. But yeah, it's a great point, Jeff. But I will say we talked about their policy about like a lifetime payout. That sounds like it's just there just for their own protection, but their own discretion, they can go above, like Ty mentioned. Like you can only imagine there's been historical evidence of this. Who was the company? Was it North Face? There was a company that would always buy back their own stuff at full value if they didn't like it. So people would go and they'd go to like thrift stores and buy all of it and then take it back and then return it all. And so they had to stop that because of individuals. So that would have happened. It's going to happen in this hobby where we see people camping out for a $10 flip on Pokemon card. For a fact they're going to start looking for off-center PSA 10s and cashing in. And I'm not defending PSA. I'm just saying, like, I'm glad they didn't follow their terms exactly right now. So good for them.
So this maybe you guys said this Wilt Chamberlain, this was like the one in an SGC slab previous to being a PSA slab, right? Did we talk about that?
No, I don't even know. Was it a new flip? Was it an old flip? I assumed it was an old flip.
I thought it was old.
No, I don't. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. Maybe I missed something. This is like vaguely ringing a bell. If I'm not mistaken, this card was an SGC 10. So like this was a Wilt Chamberlain that was found raw as like in somebody's collection or somewhere, and then it went to SGC. And so there was a lot of hubbub about this card even having gone to SGC in the first place and not to PSA. And then SGC graded it a 10. And I think it sold for more like as part of some private deal and then came full circle. And that person who bought it privately for like over $1 million, I don't remember the number, they took it to PSA and PSA crossed it to a 10. And then it sold publicly for almost $1 million, and now it's being downgraded to a 9. It's like just this bizarre history with this card. I'm not saying anything funny happened here, but like the term money laundering gets thrown around a lot in this industry, especially with high profile cards, and this just smacks of like a weird trajectory for the card overall. And if I'm correct about that, having been SGC private sale, I've just had concerns all along with how private sales get reported to the public with like no verifiability. Even when people say like, oh, the money, changed bank accounts or whatever, like that doesn't mean anything. So I don't know. I was trying to like quick punch out and see if this is the same one. I imagine Collect or somebody had an article on that.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this while Ty's looking that up?
I found it.
Let me ask a question. Right, does that give you guys confidence in PSA or less confidence in PSA, this whole situation? I
don't have any confidence in any grading company. I really don't. I don't know how we could. I feel like everybody would be a fool. Anybody who's sent any number of cards, even 5 or 10, knows that the grading, it's just a freaking roll of the dice, wild ride adventure, and whether or not your grades are going to get what you think they will. Like people send our stuff, send cards in all the time through the grading partnership that we've had for a few years at Cards HQ with Got Baseball Cards in Atlanta. And they will do a pre-screen for people for like $3 a card to evaluate it. And their team is talking about a team that's been looking at cards and evaluating them for grading, like probably hundreds of thousands of cards over the last 20 years. And they don't know. They don't make any promises. They just say like, oh, we think there's an issue here. We probably wouldn't send it if you're trying to get a 10 or at least a 9. But like, it'll just come back. To go look up any grading reveal for anybody, whether it's Elite Co 3 is the best example. Nolan, like all of his videos are grading reveals, and he like knows exactly which company he wants to send certain cards to, and then he'll be like, probably going to crack this one out, send it back. It's going to get a 10 the next time, and comes back a 10. So it's yeah. I don't like to use the word scam, but it is a joke. I think it's kind of a joke. Sorry.
Yeah, confidence level I would say is low. Like Ty said, but to me, it's just you decide whether to play the game or not. That going in, the inconsistencies there, but also the upside is there in case you want to sell the cards. So I see why people don't. I see why people call it a scam. I see why people think it's unfair. It's just a decision, an individual decision you have to make, whether you want cards for your collection encased or you want cards to sell. It's just if you want to play the game.
Yeah, with me, it's a no change. It's whatever. I don't view them any more positively or negatively. Just business as usual. PSA.
That's what it is for that. I think, I don't know if I brought it up on here or SCI or both, but at the end of the day, the people who are financially motivated, and that's their primary motivation with the cards that they're getting graded, are just going to keep going to PSA. They will not change. They won't change because the market dynamic hasn't changed. And I don't know how the market dynamic could change unless those people made a decision to change. They're not going to. They don't, the flippers and the dealers and everybody who just wants to get cards graded to get value increase to then sell them, they're just going to keep going to PSA. Why would they go anywhere else?
It's kind of the point of modern grading is the value aspect. Because obviously grading historically, the goal was to, one, authenticate if the card is real, which is a big problem with vintage. It's harder to do that now. It still happens with counterfeits. But the second one was just strictly for value. And so that's kind of where we're at right now for modern stuff is you can keep it in one touch. I guess liquidity, so you can agree on condition with the third independent party, which is really nice. That was a nice factor. It's tough. I don't think this changes my opinion. I know PSA does this, so it wasn't like a shocking thing necessarily. But to those that are new to this, it is a very weird thing to hear.
If you guys know, you might not know Curtis, 90s kid card collector on Instagram. So he's basketball and football. He doesn't do much baseball, if any. But he was like the #1 evangelist for forever since I've been in the hobby for like keeping your cards raw.
I remember this, Ty. Yep.
And he does do pretty regular consolidation and curation within his own collection. And like he'll buy stuff and get really excited. And here he's got all of his cards, raw. And then all of a sudden he just made a decision. And there's a post somewhere on his grid where he talks about his decision to start grading his cards and to start grading them with PSA. And he's made a big transition and he's like sending everything to PSA. I think he bought this one in a 9.5 and he just tried to cross it over and it got a 9. But I asked him, why? And like, he just was like, he had a whole bunch of reasons, but he did admit like one of them was because of the value. He's like, I've been buying these cards raw and even or graded and like cracking them out to have them raw. And I realized it makes it a lot harder to sell them when I need to sell them.
Much harder.
And one of the biggest liquidity engine right now is selling to repackers to get top dollar for your cards. And if you're doing that, they need to be graded.
Yeah.
Like the repackers aren't buying raw cards. They only buy graded.
Well, and the big thing is, I'm sure he was getting taken advantage of a little bit, saying, "Oh, I can't go over the cost of a PSA 8." He's like, "Well, I know it's 9. I cracked it out." Like, "Well, I have to get it regraded and the cost associated." It's like I don't blame him at all. It's unfortunate that we feel that way because how many of us? You probably all sold raw cards, and there's so much skepticism from people trying to buy your cards, and they always lowball because they're raw. So I can't blame anybody who's doing it when they're reselling. It's not a necessity.
Yeah,
but
we know the value on like a PSA 9 on most cards today, like ultra modern, is the same or even worse than a raw card in most cases. But the part that's not talked about is how much easier it is to sell the PSA 9.
Yes.
It will sell immediately. Like, and raw is way more volatile. If you put your raw up on fixed price, it might just sit there. But if it's a 9, like Arena Club or Courtyard or Graded Grails or GameStop or somebody's, like they've got like bots hitting every single website and eBay just looking for stuff, like some of these guys, and they're out at shows. So it's definitely an interesting thing. I just found that Wilt Chamberlain, I was right about this. I was remembering this correctly. So Wilt Chamberlain rookie sells for 1.7 million. I'm going to say supposedly. And it was sitting in a closet for 60 years and sold privately for 1.7 million in a deal brokered by Golden Auctions. And then this SGC 10, I'm 95% certain, if I remember correctly, was then taken to PSA and crossed over to a PSA 10 and then was sold for half of the supposed private sale value, which has now been, let's call it, cashed out and downgraded to a PSA 9. So, yeah, I think it's this one. I guess if we pulled up a picture, we could probably tell looking at it, but just weird.
So if that's the case, I need to walk back the statement that it was an old PSA slab and that's why it was wrong. So forgive me there if it's not the old PSA label. But I think that mentality still stands where people look at old PSA labels and assume it's in worse condition than they say because of the old label. I think that still stands, but I want to walk that back then. So
you know what? Now that I'm looking at it, Scott, you might be right.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah,
no, I might just be mixing two different things. I might be. I'm pretty sure that SGC 10 got then taken to PSA, but I don't know. Somebody will be yelling at me in the comments that I'm getting my facts crossed.
The SGC 10 example is a little off top bottom, but left right look pretty strong. So
if you want to share my screen, I've got it pulled up.
I was just gonna say I have both of them here.
And this is a different card for sure. Then
yes. The card featured an old label and
good
for reholdering before being consigned to Heritage.
All right, so
so they went to reholder it and they said we can't grade this at 10 anymore. He didn't ask it to be okay. So what ended up happening is he sent this to PSA.
No, it said once again got a 10 in the new holder.
Oh wow! Okay,
then
never
sold
mind.
for $976,000. Uneasy with the quality of the 10. The winning bidder submitted for a grade guarantee.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as a consumer in the hobby, you should, as Scott's alluding to, I mean, the one thing that would change if you're not already doing this already would be to look at the holder and apply a discount to old holders. And you can tell by looking at the cert if it's like one of the first 30, 50 million, especially 10 million certs. That means it was printed a long time ago. You can actually go to ChatGPT and you can like put in a ballpark and it'll tell you like it'll give you like a 4-month range for when they think it was graded too, if that also helps. Before I'd have to go to the LeetCo 3 archives to see like when he was submitting cards, getting them back, and what those certs were to try to get an estimate. And I'd have to go to like 20 of his videos to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, clearly the standards have changed, or the interpretation of the standards has changed over the years. And it is what it is. If you're looking for an insurance payout, sure. If you really don't care what the card looks like at all, and you want to pay up for that higher grade, whether it's a 9 or a 10, knowing that it could be overgraded, I mean, that's your prerogative. But for me, I mean, before I'd be applying like a 5 or 10% premium to the new holders, but in some cases it's got to be higher than that, or a bigger discount than that on the inverse of that for the older holders.
These are definitely different copies.
Yep.
You can tell they're different. So apologies to those I scandalized by conflating these two things.
Yeah, that's interesting reading the story. So the purchaser bought it for almost $1 million, but then was uneasy with the grade, which seems weird because why would you pay that much for it then?
I mean, we've all purchased cards and then we get it in hand and you're like, something's not right. Am I the only one that's had that happen?
No, I agree that that's happened, but he could see that it was off-centered.
But I mean, like, if he's able to get an insurance payout plus he gets to keep the card, I mean, he gets a refund plus he gets to keep a cool PSA 9. I mean, it's totally worth it for him.
I don't know, but I mean, he'll get paid the difference. So he's going to get paid the difference between the last PSA 9 sale, which was like $130,000, and what he paid, $976,000. So for me, it seems like a break even. I thought it would be somebody who bought the card a long time ago when it was a lower value, and now they see they can cash out and keep the card. So for this, it just seems like maybe he just wanted to make the news, but it was also taking that 250,000 cap, which they do mention in this article. He had to take a chance on that. If PSA was only going to pay that much, then he'd be left with a PSA 9 worth $130,000 and $250,000 in cash for what he paid $1 million for.
And that's not the type of card you can just re-auction. You got to keep that type of card.
Yeah.
Like sometimes if you auction cards of that magnitude too quickly, you can really take a bath. So you probably made the right move.
Yeah. Just curious. Like if you were in the shoes of, say it's a different card, it's a baseball card, you know, maybe it's $25,000. How much more are you going to pay for that clean PSA 10 with a new holder? Because I said 5 to 10%, but I actually think it could be closer to like 30%.
Well, I was looking at Pokemon cards. I know that's off topic, not what you asked.
Yeah.
I would pay a massive premium for a new
Yeah.
PSA label with a centered copy versus an old label.
Especially
with not.
centering. Yeah. Especially the
They
centering.
changed that changed straight up from 60/40 to 65/35. That's a big difference.
Right. Ty, what do you think? Like, how much more would you pay for the cleaner copy and the newer holder?
Well, I think the number I've typically heard is that 5 to 10%. I think that's what I generally hear from people saying. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still evaluating the card yourself. Like, so if you you can find a better copy in an old holder, and then you can get it reholdered depending on what it is.
Yeah.
Do we hear what we're saying? Do we hear how idiotic all of this?
It's all crazy.
It's
all crazy. Yeah. It's all look, at the end of the day, the collective hobby hive mind has agreed that they care more about a label and a number than the card itself.
Yeah.
That's what they care about. However you want to label it, no pun intended, I guess. However you want to describe the dynamic, you're either saying, I care more about the opinion of some random person in any random state of mind and frame of mind and skill level in a remote facility where I put my card at risk to send it in the mail with the risk it gets damaged and stolen and all these things, and then I'm willing to believe, like a fiat currency, that it's suddenly like 3 to 4 to 20,000 times more expensive and valuable because it's now in this holder. And it's a lot of it's like the ultimate irony. Most people will actually believe that they have like a keen eye for assessing the condition of their cards, but they don't believe in themselves enough to just buy raw cards or to like value a 9, with more value than a 10. Like, it's just it's a very, very strange dynamic, but it's one that exists. It's a real dynamic, and so it's not going to change anytime soon.
Go, Phil.
I was going to say, I think when we're talking commodity cards that have a massive PSA 9 to PSA 10 multiplier, like the first edition Holo Pokemon base set, like we're talking like a 10x multiplier from 9 to 10. I think, and that plus, are you going to be holding the card for at least 2 to 3 years, if not 5 to 10 or longer? If that's the case, like, you should really pay up. Like for me, I've got this Venusaur listed at a stupid price in eBay that it's in my store, right? In my head, I have like this 30% markup. So I'm never going to sell it probably because of that. But I know how hard it is to find a accurately graded PSA 10 version of that same card, even though it's like a pop 140, 150. I know 2/3 are kind of mangled PSA 10s, in my opinion. Either OC or they've got some sort of edge wear in the back.
Yeah. And Pokemon's so obvious with a tiny bit of white that probably wouldn't be a 10 now. So if yours is perfect blue, it's hard to argue with that argument, Phil.
Yeah.
So Jeff, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way, but you and Chris grade the most at everybody here for your collection. And you guys grade all the time. You have Blab and Live reveals on your personal channel. Why do you guys do it? Because you guys are grading the most. Because you're also grading more of these, not commodity cards, they're SSPs. You have a lot of SSPs, but you will also grade Tawny 2020 Stadium Club Chrome. So what's the rationale for you guys?
The rationale, especially for the commodity cards, is to get them graded and sell them for a higher price and use them to buy the rarer cards.
Okay.
We since the prices of PSA have went up, we don't grade as much anymore, but we just submitted we put in a sub for grading, and it included a bunch of 2020 Stadium Club Chrome cards like Aaron Judge and Bryce Harper, cards that aren't worth that much, but they also are hard to get in a 10, and people like them in a 10. So we can sell them and then use them to fund our rare SSP cards. So we grade our, like the Chrome, we're trying to put the Chrome SSP collection together, the Chrome sets from 2012, 2013, 2014, and we're almost there. But those we grade for uniformity. So we've got a 6, a Verlander and a 6. We've got a couple 8s, mostly 9s and 10s, but mostly we're grading it for authenticity and uniformity. So we have that all in a set. But yeah, otherwise, I'd say our grading is down probably 90% from what it was at the peak, because there was a time when you could grade just about anything and make a huge return on it, and then you could use that to buy the cards you want for your collection. So that's really what we were using it for. Now it's more for just keeping consistency with the collection for the cards we want to keep. So we grade our old Topps Black Parallels, but we get a lot of 7s and 8s on those. We're not really trying to get gems, or grading the cards, like I said, to sell, to fund those. So that's really what we do. So I can't imagine for either of those purposes choosing another grading company right now. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, I agree with you on, I mean, we still have forgeries in the modern hobby. We can see right now, if you go look up like 2011 to 2013 era Topps Chrome cards, you'll see some fake superfractors that are either backdoors or from a sheet because they're not stamped one of ones and they're labeled as such. And so you know that. But like I have 2 Billy Butlers I just sent in 2 PSA yesterday that are superfractors that I just want in a PSA slab so it's authenticated. Like I still think that that is valuable.
Agreed.
I still think that service is important, but it just comes down to the card in particular. So
there's I try to like point out things, just put things in front of people. This is the comparison, right? If you're at 9s versus 10s. So, and there are people on both sides of this camp. But if I look at this, you can get the SP variation with the bat in his hand in a 10 for 3,200 for Ohtani, or you can get that card in a 9, as well as a gold rookie debut in a 9 and a Bowman Chrome rookie in a 9. It's personal preference. That's what it comes down to. My boss, Jeff, would say he'd much rather have this every time. He likes having the 10 and fewer cards. I think more of it's more common maybe amongst people who are firstly focused on collecting to say, I would love to have all 3 of these cards like in my collection, even if they're in 9s.
I mean, if you're looking to, I mean, it's just Jeff's probably right, honestly, because the way PSA 10s are trending, they're just exponentially going up. We see that with every sale of major players. So
they are
probably right, but from a collector's, if you want to keep those cards, then yes, buy the 9s. But like all those cards, from an investment perspective, could all be a danger because
there is something like more
tough.
There's something psychologically more premium feeling about having a card graded. It tells you like somebody took the care to send this and get it authenticated and secured and protected, and it's more liquid in the back of your mind. And so it's like, well, which is better, which is more appealing. I like one touches. Like you see a card in a top loader, it doesn't feel particularly special. It's just like, man, it's in a top loader,
True.
right?
Yeah.
And it could be a $10,000 card in a top loader. And you're like, oh gosh, as soon as it hits this like hard acrylic and gets solid welded shut, everybody's like, oh man, now we're talking. And then you put it inside of, one of these things.
Oh,
and now you're like, so by the way, I've been told by people on Instagram now, or on social media now, that this card is backdoored and fake. So I'm trying to figure out if there's any truth to that.
Hey, that's why. That's the reason you buy PSA, Ty, right there.
That's Beckett. There's no insurance.
They would have given you a refund.
I might just send it to PSA and have them look at it and say, what do you think, and then go from there. But
that really is, like, honestly, what you just said is one of the legitimate reasons why PSA is still a viable and part of the hobby. Because for some of those cards, like those backdoor ones with fake stamps, PSA still will protect you. So BGS is just like, I wonder if BGS will protect you now because they're owned by PSA. Will they get that added in?
No, because they didn't do it at the time, I imagine. But
bummer.
By the way, last thing I'll say, I think we're probably almost done here, but I looked up the cert to that SGC 10 Wilt Chamberlain, and it is deactivated. So I did remember correctly that it was crossed to PSA. I'm 99% sure it was taken to PSA and given a 10 and is no longer an SGC 10. But it's not the same card as the one that was just downgraded.
In the story.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We appreciate it. If you enjoy our content, check out our Patreon. You also get access to our Discord. So you get one extra video a week, plus you get access to like-minded Spitball and Collectors and us, where we ask questions and chat and do all sorts of fun stuff. So it's very active. Discord's been awesome. I'm glad we've done it. It's $10 a month. If you're interested, the link is in the description. Check it out, and we'll see you in the next episode.